It is a cruel and quiet thing when the world finally gives you everything you asked for. When the applause fades and the pages are full and the house is warm with children's laughter, and still, you lie awake at night with a hollow weight pressing into your chest, unexplainable, unshakable. A silence not outside but inside. A silence with teeth. Leo Tolstoy was not a man chasing the dream. He had already caught it. Fame that echoed through empires. Words that altered nations. A family, a fortune, adoration, legacy. And yet at 50, he stood at the edge of a metaphorical cliff, staring into the absurdity of it all with the clarity of a man stripped bare. What he saw was not the summit. It was a lie. Not just his lie. Our lie. The lie of success. The lie of fulfillment. The lie that the soul can be fed with laurels and gold and the praises of the crowd. In the quiet corners of our modern world, this same despair hides behind screens and routines and social media smiles. It lives in the scrolling thumb, in the numbing binge, in the anxious echo of achievement without purpose, in the child who became the doctor, the lawyer, the millionaire, in the artist who dreamed of recognition and now drowns in it. In you, in me. The question rises, what is the point of it all if the feast only leaves us hungrier? Tolstoy, who gave us war and peace, who moved kings and peasants alike with the breadth of his mind, found himself unable to go on. He could not write, could not sleep, could not eat without wondering why he should. Why not kill myself? He wrote, not as a dramatist, but as a man speaking into the abyss of his own mind. And we must listen, not to his books, but to his breakdown. He had reached the end of the road that we are all told to walk. And at the end, he found nothing. Not peace, not joy, not even rest. Only a dark, unbearable emptiness. Not the emptiness of failure, but the void that opens after success, once the mask has slipped and the curtain has fallen. He had not lost anything. That was the horror. He had gained everything, and it was meaningless. This is not an old man's despair. It is the secret heartbeat of our age. We are told to strive, to achieve, to climb. From childhood, we are bathed in the gospel of progress. That if we keep going, if we get the job, the partner, the car, the house, the legacy, something will click. The anxiety will stop. The purpose will arrive. And yet we watch people rise, only to fall into addiction, isolation, spiritual disintegration. We see the rich destroy themselves. We see celebrities confess to feeling empty. And still, we think the problem is ours alone, that we are broken. But maybe it is not us. Maybe it is the system, the promise, the illusion, the myth that we can be fulfilled by the things of the world when our hunger is not of the world. A soul cannot be satisfied with reputation. A heart cannot rest in success. A mind cannot find peace in applause. These are echoes, not answers. Shells, not substance. Tolstoy knew this because he had devoured it all and found it rotten. He did not romanticize despair. He lived it. He hid his ropes and his guns out of fear he would use them. He stopped going hunting because he might not resist the impulse to end it in the woods. This was no dramatic episode. It was a slow implosion, a collapse of meaning beneath the weight of too much having, too much knowing, too much being seen. The world said he had won. His soul whispered otherwise. And so the question returns, ancient and terrible. What is the meaning of my life? Not in a book, not in a quote, but in the marrow, in the blood, in the night when sleep will not come. What will come of what I am doing today or shall do tomorrow? He asked. We scroll past such questions. Distract, perform, achieve, but they wait for us. Patient, eternal. The soul is not fooled by achievement. It does not care about numbers. It does not care how many followers you have, how many titles, how many possessions. It only asks, why? And most cannot answer. Not because they're unwise, but because the path they were given never led them to ask. The pain Tolstoy felt was not a personal crisis. It was a spiritual mirror held up to the modern world. A warning not shouted, but whispered in the trembling voice of a man who had nothing left to gain and still found himself lost. And so we begin here, not with a lesson, but with a silence. Not with a hero, but with a broken man who had everything and wanted to die. He had everything, and he could not bear it. There is something monstrous in that fact. A kind of quiet apocalypse that takes place not in revolutions or betrayals, but in the gentle collapse of meaning within a seemingly perfect life. You wake up one morning and everything still fits. The world is still in its place. Your name still holds weight. Your children still laugh. The pages still come. The sunlight still warms your window. But something inside has changed. Something has died. And you don't know when. That is how it begins. Tolstoy stood at the summit of all he had dreamed and felt nothing. Not joy, not pride, not even fear. Just a numbness, vast and unrelenting. The world, once rich with color, had turned to ash. And he could not explain why. Not to his friends, not to his wife, not even to himself. He wrote that he feared the rope in the barn, feared walking into the woods alone. He feared his own mind, because something inside it had opened. Something cold and final and without pity. Not depression in the medical sense, but metaphysical nausea. The soul's slow realization that it has been chasing a ghost. Every achievement, every comfort, every nod of approval, empty. It is the most terrifying revelation a human being can endure. That life, as it is given to us, might be a trick. That the path of work, success, family, and legacy, even when followed perfectly, leads not to peace, but to the void. Tolstoy did not whisper this truth. He screamed it silently, across pages that felt like confessions made not to an audience, but to God, or perhaps to the absence of God. He asked a question that most do not dare to articulate. If death renders all things meaningless, then what is the point of anything? It is the ultimate horror, because it poisons every joy. The laughter of your children becomes unbearable. The love of your partner turns bittersweet. Even your own breath feels borrowed, because it all leads to the same vanishing point. The grave. Tolstoy's words were not abstract. They were the moanings of a man standing before the mirror, seeing not his face, but a skull beneath it. The smile still formed. The eyes still blinked. But the shadow of death whispered in every gesture. And yet the world around him saw none of it. To them, he was a genius, a father, a cultural hero, a beacon. The applause had never been louder. But what applause can reach the ears of a man who has gone deaf to hope? That is the cruelty of it. Despair is invisible, especially in the successful. We envy those who suffer in silence. We call them fortunate. We would trade lives with them, not knowing that the view from their mountaintop is often more horrifying than the valley. Because they see clearly. They see that no matter how high you climb, death is always waiting, not in the shadows, but in the light, smiling, patient. Tolstoy saw it in every object around him. The pen on his desk, the wine on his table, the eyes of his children, the face of his wife. It was everywhere. The quiet question, why live when it all ends in nothing? This was not melodrama. It was the collapse of illusion. And it is a collapse we must all one day face. Because every system of meaning we inherit is built on borrowed time. The stories we are told about success, about love, about legacy begin to decay the moment we begin to question them. And when that rot spreads to the core, we find ourselves like Tolstoy, noble, respected, admired, and utterly lost. We think despair only strikes the broken, the lonely, the wounded. But the truth is darker. It strikes hardest at the peak, because only from the peak can you see that there is no higher ground. You thought the journey had a purpose. You thought you were ascending toward meaning. But now you see, it was a circle, a loop, an echo chamber of effort. And the center is empty. Tolstoy's life became a paradox. He loved his family but felt nothing. He adored literature but found no comfort in words. He possessed the world and found it tasteless, like a banquet laid out for a man with no tongue. What do you do when nothing brings relief? Not faith, not philosophy, not art, not touch. You wonder. You linger. You breathe because your body still remembers how. You smile because your face is trained to do so. You continue because you do not know how to stop. And all the while, the question beats in the back of your mind like a second heart. Why? 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 But no answer comes. Only silence. And in that silence, something worse than death, awareness. That the world does not owe you meaning. That maybe it never had any to give. Not everyone gets to fall apart. To stand in the center of one's life, stable, safe, surrounded, and collapse inward like a star imploding under its own gravity is a privilege. Most are too busy surviving to have a crisis of meaning. But for those who have ascended beyond struggle, the abyss waits like a forgotten god. Patient, starving. This was Tolstoy's curse. He could afford to ask what others dared not. And in asking, he fell into a darkness far more brutal than poverty or illness. A spiritual sickness with no wound to treat. No bleeding. No visible scar. He wrote of standing among his family, watching his children play, his wife smile, the sun rise, and feeling nothing but dread. He could no longer hide behind the ordinary. The illusion had ruptured, and once it breaks, you cannot unsee it. Others laughed, saying, worried about petty things. He envied them, because they still believed. But belief had abandoned him. What is society if not a theater where everyone pretends they know what they are doing? Where purpose is mimicked like a dance, earn, buy, love, reproduce, grieve, retire, die, all under the illusion that it matters. But behind the curtain, there is no script, no plot, just breath, then silence. Tolstoy saw this, and it broke him. He tried to return to faith, the faith of his childhood, of his ancestors. But the churches were hollow. The priests preached obedience, not truth. Their words echoed, but did not echo back. He found no God in their sermons, only performance. The rituals no longer meant anything. They were shadows pretending to be substance. Even prayer felt like whispering into a void that only absorbed, never answered. So he searched elsewhere, in philosophy, in science, in the old thinkers and the new. But every answer was a mask, and he saw the seams. He devoured theories like a starving man eats dust. And still, the hunger remained. The more he read, the more he unraveled. No system could hold him. No worldview could shelter his soul from the storm that had been born inside it. And so he wrote, but not fiction, not anymore. He wrote the cry of a man trying to hold onto a rope slipping through his fingers. A confession was not literature. It was a wound torn open on the page. And through it, he showed us something few dare to name. The soul can decay even in paradise. Because paradise without purpose is just another form of prison. And we modern, comfortable, medicated, we are not immune. We smile for photos. We chase metrics. We build brands out of our own faces. We find ways to feel important. But in the stillness of the night, when the feed stops, when no one is watching, when the world is quiet, we feel it. That same slow rot. That same question. What is all of this for? And we do what he did. We distract. We decorate our cages. We tell ourselves stories. We call it self-care. Hustle. Progress. But the echo beneath remains. The knowing that everything we build is temporary. That everything we love will die. That everything we are is dissolving, moment by moment, into time. Tolstoy lived this with every breath, and he could not run from it. Not with writing, not with wealth, not with company, because the enemy was inside him. It was him. And this is the quiet terror of self-awareness. It does not arrive with a scream. It arrives in whispers. A phrase here, a glance there, the sudden meaninglessness of a routine, the haunting question in a child's eyes, the feeling that you've heard it all before, and it never helped. Society has no space for such despair. It does not fit on a billboard. It does not sell. And so we silence it. Or worse, we pathologize it. We call it depression and throw pills at it. But sometimes it is not a malfunction. Sometimes it is truth. Raw, unfiltered, untamed. Tolstoy's breakdown was not a weakness. It was a vision. The peeling away of illusions so complete that the world itself seemed to vanish. And what remained? Breath, sky, death. A man alone with his soul, stripped of context, drifting in a universe that refused to answer. And from that silence, a new voice. Not of comfort, not of doctrine, but of honesty, of surrender, of the courage to see things as they are, even when it burns. And though he would later find his way to faith again, it was not the faith of books or churches. It was the faith born of emptiness. The kind that doesn't explain, doesn't promise, doesn't soothe. It simply is. Like wind, like hunger, like the cry of a newborn who does not yet know what he is crying for. Tolstoy stood at the edge and looked down, and what he saw was not madness. It was us. It begins not with a scream, but with a stillness so profound it feels like drowning. There is no trumpet announcing revelation, no lightning strike of clarity, just a slow, almost imperceptible change in the way the air tastes, in the way the shadows fall, in the way your own voice echoes inside your chest. Something inside begins to turn, not toward joy, not yet, but away from the lie. And that, in itself, is holy. Tolstoy sat with death not as a concept, but as a companion. He did not escape it with books or distractions. He let it sit beside him, whispering in his ear at dawn, following him into his dreams. He did not flinch. He asked it questions. He begged for its silence. He wept in its presence. And then, one day, he no longer feared it, not because he had found answers, but because he had stopped pretending to need them. The question, "What is the meaning of my life?" had become too large, too shapeless to hold in words. It no longer demanded a solution. It became a rhythm, a shadow, a pulse. And in that surrender, something stirred. A new kind of awareness. The kind that doesn't scream for resolution, but watches, listens, feels. He began to see things again. The curl of smoke from a chimney. The creak of old wood under bare feet. The way a child stares into the wind as if it carries secrets. Nothing extraordinary. And yet, each thing shimmered, not with meaning, but with being. It was not revelation. It was permission to not know, to walk without direction, to speak without certainty, to love without need, to breathe without purpose. There is a kind of freedom that exists only on the far side of despair, a freedom stripped of desire, of ambition, of the ego's constant hunger to matter. It does not shout, "You are important." It whispers, "You are alive." And that is enough. At first, it feels like madness. How can one live without answers? Without a map? Without the steady drumbeat of goals, milestones, validations? But slowly, the silence becomes familiar. The emptiness becomes spacious. The fear begins to dissolve. You begin to realize that you were never chasing truth. You were chasing comfort. You wanted life to make sense because the chaos frightened you. But what if the chaos isn't the enemy? What if it's the invitation? Tolstoy did not become happy. He became clear. And in that clarity, he began to walk a different path, not away from the world, but deeper into it. He stopped writing novels and began living questions. He gave away his wealth. He spoke to peasants. He walked for hours alone, without destination. He ceased to believe in the structures that once defined him. He did not escape suffering. He no longer needed to. And maybe that is the quiet rebellion, the first crack in the illusion. To stop running, to stop pretending, to stand in the ruins of what you thought life was supposed to be and feel the wind on your skin. No stories, no goals, just the breath, the light, the ache. You begin to see your own hands as strange and miraculous. You begin to see others not as characters in your story, but as silent travelers beside you, just as lost, just as broken, just as sacred. You begin to see that every face is a question, and there are no right answers. Only the willingness to look, to sit with the trembling, to walk barefoot through the storm and not ask why, but how long can I stay awake inside this moment? And here, in this awakening, not joy, but reverence. Not salvation, but softness. The beginning of something unspeakable. And it does not save you. It happens slowly. Not like a wave, but like a thread unraveling one breath at a time. You wake into the same life, the same ceiling, the same dishes waiting to be washed. But something has shifted in the marrow. A kind of stillness you didn't invite. A kind of clarity you did not choose. And it is not peace. It is exposure. The mask you've worn for decades, dutiful, smiling, functional, begins to slip. Not in public, but in the privacy of your own being. Alone, you feel its weight, its falseness. And for the first time, you do not rush to fix it. You simply let it fall. This is not freedom. Not yet. It is the morning before the release. The recognition of what can no longer be sustained. The self you've been performing begins to decay, and you do not stop it. You've become tired of pretending, tired of grasping at plans and performances, tired of nodding through conversations, of placing meaning where there is only habit. The words of others grow distant. You hear them, but they do not reach you. You are somewhere else, somewhere deeper. You begin to see that what you feared all your life, emptiness, loneliness, silence, is not the enemy. It is the truth beneath the noise. And it is not cruel, only honest. The applause you once craved now feels like static. The admiration, a kind of mirror that reflects a stranger. You remember your achievements like one recalls a fever dream, real, but no longer yours. They drift around you like dust motes in a light too bright. Even love, once your anchor, begins to tremble. Not because it is false, but because you no longer use it to define yourself. You love not to belong, not to be seen, but because it flows from you like breath. And if it is returned, you are grateful. And if it is not, you are still here. You begin to weep in places where you once laughed, not from pain, but from recognition. The child you once were, the questions he asked, the fears he carried, never left you. They were simply buried beneath layers of performance, ambition, and necessity. And now they rise, not to destroy you, but to be heard. Tolstoy wrote of such moments not with pride, but with tremor. He stood in the fields of his wealth, his family, his legacy, and saw that none of it could save him from himself. He had crafted a life so complete it became a cage. And when the bars disappeared, he realized they had always been made of paper. He didn't scream. He didn't destroy. He simply let go, one piece at a time. The name, the wealth, the genius. He saw them as decorations on a house already abandoned. And what remained? A man walking barefoot through the questions. A man who no longer needed to be someone. We do not speak of such freedom because it terrifies us. A life without identity, a soul without ambition, a heart without armor. But this is what comes at the end of performance. This is the cost of truth. Everything false must die, and you begin to let it. The routines once sacred become optional. The mirrors once worshipped are turned to the wall. You begin to speak less. And when you do, your voice is softer. Not because you are unsure, but because you no longer need to convince. You no longer feed on certainty. You no longer demand that life reward you. You no longer wait for answers before you act. You simply move. And in each motion, you begin to feel real. Not right. Not good. Not fulfilled. Real. You look around and see a world still asleep in performance. And your heart breaks, not from judgment, but from tenderness. You know what it means to pretend. You know the cost. And still, you say nothing. You simply remain. A presence. A witness. Perhaps that is all the light asks of us. Not to fix. Not to teach. Not to shine. But to be. Naked. Silent. Alive. And now, nothing speaks. No conclusions. No destination. No promised land beyond the desert of despair. Just this moment, and the shape of what remains after everything else has fallen away. Tolstoy did not rise from his darkness like a prophet. He did not claim triumph, nor declare victory over the void. He simply walked on, barefoot through the stillness, carrying less with each step. His name no longer a flag, but a shadow. His purpose no longer declared, but felt, quietly, like a pulse. There are no grand endings, only quieter beginnings. The soul does not explode into truth. It dissolves into it, like fog into morning, like breath into wind. There is a different kind of peace found only in those who have suffered the collapse of everything they believed would save them. It is not loud. It does not shine. It does not sell books. But you can see it in the eyes of those who carry it. The weightlessness, the silence, the absence of needing to be anything but here. You may find it walking alone at dusk, in a kitchen with no music playing, in the way light moves across old wood, in the voice of a stranger who looks at you and doesn't ask for anything. You may find it without even knowing you were looking. It is not joy, but it is free, and it does not flee from sorrow. It lets it sit at the table, pours it tea, calls it by its name, because sorrow, too, is part of this life, not as a mistake, not as an error to be fixed, but as a companion. Everything ends. The body decays. The name is forgotten. The world moves on. But there is something just beyond the reach of language that watches it all, that says yes to this moment, and this one, and the next, not because they make sense, but because they are real. And to be real, even once, even for a breath, is enough. You do not need to know more than that. You do not need to be more than that. Even Tolstoy, standing at the edge of his own mythology, gave up the search for final meaning. He turned toward the ordinary, toward the soil, toward the eyes of the poor, toward the weight of a loaf of bread in an open hand, toward the silence between two people who no longer needed to speak. And there, he found something that did not ask to be named. And so do we, not in answers, but in being. The river does not explain its path. The wind does not justify its direction. The night does not apologize for its darkness. And the soul, when stripped of its armor, does not seek to be understood. It only seeks to be seen. And in that seeing, it becomes light. Not the light of revelation, but the soft glow of presence, of being awake, of no longer needing anything more than this breath, this body, this sorrow, this stillness, this mystery, this moment that does not last and yet is everything. You are not lost. You are simply here, and that is enough.